Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My name is David Rao. I'm curator of visitor engagement at the Florence Griswold Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to and introduce this year's Samuel Thorne Memorial Lecture. The Thorne Lecture is an endowed lecture series that allows for the Florence Griswold Museum to invite distinguished speakers and thinkers to share their work with the Flo-Gris family. It is named in the memory of Samuel Thorne, the father of Samuel Spike Thorne, Jr. Like his father, Spike Thorne was a significant figure at the Florence Griswold Museum, serving as vice president and second vice president in the late 1960s and 70s. He and his wife, Libby, committed $100,000 to the museum's centennial campaign, helping to build the Kriebel Gallery in 2002. He and his mother established this Samuel Thorne Lecture Series in 1995. This year marks the 30th anniversary of this endowed program. Sadly, it also falls just weeks after the passing of Samuel Spike Thorne, Jr., who died October 19th at the age of 96. We dedicate this lecture in memory of him. This year's selection for speaker is a direct result of the museum's curatorial team's work on the current exhibition, Inside Out, Context for American Art, which features a sculpture by American sculptor John Rogers, in addition to 4 other anchor works. In order for us to best explain the context of how such a work might have been created, we reached out to our neighbors at the Lime Academy of Fine Arts and spoke to Chad Fisher about filming a demonstration. The outcome was a 20-minute film by John Christen featuring Chad Fisher sculpting Kyle Temosatis. The film, which is both beautiful and mesmerizing, exceeded all of our expectations. It plays continuously in the exhibition, which will be on view until early next year. It was our work with Chad and his team that made us very interested in extending an invitation for him to discuss sculpture with a wider audience. Chad Fisher is the Charlotte Colby Danley Sculpture Chair and Director of Sculpture at the Lime Academy of Fine Arts here in Old Lyme. He is a fine art sculptor who has vertically integrated his process in order to control the quality and the poetry of the final creation. Through his studio foundry, Fisher Sculpture Limited, which he operates with his wife, Denise, he has created more than 25 public sculptures, including fine art bronzes for the Chicago Bears Football Club, the Philadelphia 76ers, Oklahoma University, Pennsylvania Flyers, the NFL Hall of Fame, the Union League of Philadelphia, the Special Forces Charitable Trust, and the Philadelphia Vietnam Memorial. Fisher studied at Syracuse University, at the University of Pennsylvania, and the Penza Academy of Fine Arts before receiving his MFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art. He also studied at the New York Academy of Art, the Janus Collaborative, and the Schuylkill Academy of Fine Arts, as well as the Barnstone Studios, among other institutions, and has apprenticed with several notable sculptors, including Stephen Perkins, Stuart Mark Feldman, and most influentially, Gary Weissman. Through these educational opportunities, Fisher has utilized sculptural methods to develop and master his craft. Today's talk, Once Upon a Pedestal, Then, Now, Next, is the opportunity to revisit the history of sculpture and ponder the possibilities of what's next. Please join me in welcoming Chad Fisher as this year's Samuel Thorne Memorial Lecturer.
Can everyone hear me? Great, yeah, thank you. Well, thank you, David, for the warm welcome. Thank you to the Flo-Gris, Joshua, Barbara, the chair over there. It's been a wonderful collaboration. The demonstration today with JT, Joseph, and Marina was amazing. Did everyone get a chance to go over to and see the demo? Yeah, awesome. So today, I also would like to thank the opportunity that Jordan and Amaya have given me at the Lyme Academy of Fine Art. It's been just incredible building a sculpture program under their trust, and we're doing something quite special. Also, I'd like to thank my other half, wherever she is. Thank you, Denise. And everyone else from the Lyme Academy family and the Flow Grizz. So I'm going to share some information that we talk about at the Lyme Academy. Some of these discussion points will be from multiple classes, but it'll give an idea of what we're doing on that campus and how exciting it is. This here is a slide of the Medici Chapel in San Lorenzo Church in Florence. This is by Michelangelo. It's been my North Star for so many years, and it's a quite remarkable piece. The insights that I'm going to share come from my instructors, which has been a lineage which goes back to Auguste Rodin and Chaput, going back to the Beaux-Arts. And so it's a remarkable moment that this information can be passed forward. Once upon a time, a pedestal, figurative sculpture, then, now, and next. This here is its slide. It's one of the oldest paintings that we have known. It's a 40,000-year-old painting of a wild boar or pig, hunted by possibly 2 to 3 individuals. It dates back 40,000 years. This is the Venus of Willendorf, 30,000 years old. One of the oldest sculptures we have. It was found in Austria. This is the Cave of Hands, located in Argentina, about 13,000 years old. And these are terracotta portraits found in Africa, about 3,000 years old. For thousands of years, we have looked at the world around us and in an experiential way have recorded what we see, looking at the wonders of life and the miraculous nature of our time that's here. Art has become interwoven with life and spirit and the cosmos, and eventually into prayer. This is a Zen garden in Japan. Nature offers everything we need in regards of beauty, and over time, many of the great artists go back and look at the geometry of nature and reflect nature in the most honest way. The truths of beauty exist all around us. Here we have a consistent spiral of a sunflower, of leaves, of shells, and plants. Here is a wave. Again, a consistent movement as life always moves around us. Not only do we have curved linear moments of spirals, but we also have geometry. This is a snowflake under a microscope. And this is a quartz geode. And you can see the triangulations and the geometric forms. As early humans looked around, they noticed these consistencies of spirals and geometry. There's no name for it at that time, but there's coinciding parts. This here is the golden rectangle with the Fibonacci sequence included. The golden rectangle was known as nature's number, which is 0.618. 0.618 is the building block for all of us. It's reflected in our structure as it is in nature's. Here we have the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. These pyramids include the phi ratio that we just saw with the golden section. Yes, we're doing geometry. And you can see there's a triangle, and the hypotenuse of the triangle and the legs of the triangle create a ratio that's 0.618. Now the interesting thing is this is 2,000 years before Pythagoras. This is 4,500 years ago. So this is before the Library of Alexandria. Here is also 4,500 years ago. This is the Great Sphinx. And this is the oldest Egyptian statue, a statue of King Josiah, 4,500 years ago. For a moment, if we can consider the geometry used here, there's a lot of vertical elements. And he's seated on a throne. What the Egyptians offered is a doorway to the Greeks. Here are two Greek sculptures, separated by 100 years. The Greeks were able to learn to look at nature in the most honest way. And they offered truth to a physical human form. On the left, you could say it's a bit symbolic. 600 BCE. We're not moving with a naturalism at this point. And on the right, you can see it's a bit more naturalistic. They're taking time to observe nature's rules and nature's approach and rhythms. And so they're interwoven rhythms within the figure. But it's also worth noting is that here the figure is standing, and the Kuros sculpture, which is referred to as a Kuros boy, his legs are split, and so there's an interest in movement. And so at this point there's a diagonal added to the composition, where here we just have verticals. There is a diagonal with the arm, but the figure is a bit more static. And so that as the diagonal is introduced, you're creating movement. And there's no cameras at this time. There's no movie, there's no film. And so everything's always in motion. There's no frozen image. So for them, life is always moving. And so truth for them is to have a figure to display movement. And so this is the start as the Greeks open this doorway to truth. This is a Greek sculpture which many consider the pinnacle of Greek art. This is Hermes carrying the infant Dionysus. You can see here that we've moved beyond symbolism and we have moved into sincere naturalism, as there is a pursuit of honesty within form. Praxiteles is looking at nature and considering how nature moves. And so not only are we introducing straight lines, but we're also introducing curves. This is a pivotal moment in all of art history, as the curve is introduced, or the S-curve. At this point, it hasn't been introduced yet. What might be simple is actually quite profound in that way. This S-curve would echo for the rest of history. And we can look at this sculpture with great gratitude is that the pursuit of the Greeks was a pursuit in honesty of form. Following the Greeks, we move into Rome. And then following Rome and the fall of their empire, we move into the Gothic art. For time's sake, we're going to go right past that. I love Roman art. There's a beautiful naturalism with that. But we don't have that much time. And then the Gothics, we all have an idea what the Gothics are. So it might be a bit redundant. So we have Florence. We'll just move right into the High Renaissance. So early Renaissance, we have Brunelleschi. This is Brunelleschi's dome. The birth of the Renaissance in Florence is quite remarkable. There's philosophy discussed. There's science. There's old texts are found. Euclid is brought back in. Pythagoras is brought back in. And we are moving into a space where the arts are becoming reflective to what the Greeks had started. Michelangelo's David is carved during the High Renaissance. We can all be grateful for Michelangelo. Michelangelo changed art. He took what was given by the Greeks, the Egyptians, and those before him, and raised it to a level that has not been surpassed and will likely never be surpassed. This is the largest male figure carved since the Greeks. It's a miraculous sculpture. And he offered not only an opportunity for us to look at nature's rhythms and fabric of spirals and geometry, but he also gave us all permission, as my dear friend and mentor was saying, that he offered a path for all of us to break those rules. And so after him, all art changes. This is the Pietà by Michelangelo. This is carved when he's in his early 20s. It was a contract that took quite some time for it to be put together, and then actually he was allowed to begin work. How he got this contract is quite funny, is that someone hired him to make a Cupid, and then to make it old, this was a cardinal. They buried it in the ground, and then they sold it on the market, and someone found out it wasn't actually an antique, and they got really upset. But then it also led to him receiving this contract, which is one of the finest sculptures that we have. This here is also by Michelangelo, later. This is the Genius of Victory, or youth overcoming old age. You can see here there is the spiral and the geometry are very apparent. We'll look more into that later. Oh, that's fun. It's appropriate too. This is one of the finest pieces of paper that we have, known to human. This is the Libyan Sibyl. It's a preparatory study for the Sistine ceiling. It's not that large. It's about this tall. And it's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. You can make an appointment to go see it. Zach Cates, one of our instructors at Lyme Academy, took our students to see it. You're only allowed to look at it for 20 minutes and they put it away. So you got to focus. Really, really good. This here is the Sistine ceiling that Michelangelo created. It's an orchestra of human form. At the top of the screen here, you can see the David, or of Adam and God, which at the time was not the predominant moment that everyone went to when looking at the ceiling. It's actually at the bottom of the screen, is the prophet Jonah. At the bottom of the screen, the prophet Jonah is leaning back into space when the vault is actually coming forward. It's a mathematical nightmare to try to figure that out. And so many of the artists and art historians of the day were in absolute awe of this figure. What's interesting too is that Michelangelo started on the other side of the ceiling. And as he went through painting, moving the scaffolding along, and he didn't lay down, as Charles Heston was in the Agony and Ecstasy. He was actually standing up. And he wasn't a tyrant. He was actually a pretty sweet man based on other texts. Condivi, Francesca de Hollanda, and other biographers. It's actually known that Michelangelo often donated to orphanages, even though he lived in poverty. But as he went through the painting, the size of the figures and the complexity of the figures just progressed. And it's quite remarkable what he was able to do when he considered himself a sculptor. And so this here is a page of music by Beethoven. And so when we think composition, we think music composition. But as my teachers would say, and Zach, who's here, would say, music composition and art composition go hand in hand. The musical relationships that are on a page of music exist within every painting and every sculpture that you see. And so here's a fun little slide of an insane composition. Everything here is composed and is there on purpose. There's no form or body put into a position that is not consistent with the rest of this enormous composition. To look at this would take a great deal of time. So we're going to move to a sculpture that might be a little bit simpler to review. So here is a slide of the David, but it's composed. I put it on a music sheet to help land the point. But what you see are just a few lines. And this is what we call, in composition, a gamut. A gamut is a limited number of directions that exist in a composition. And so, as Myron Barnstone would say, or Zach, or Gary, is that we have 360 degrees to pick from. We don't need all of them. So if you're in F minor or D minor, you don't switch to F sharp. You stay in harmony. Here's a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Not only does this have linear perspective, but it also has composition based in a gamut. And we know this because Da Vinci wrote books. There's treatises that exist. And these treatises, some of them are at the Frick, some of them are at the Met. The Met has its own library. And so if you're an art nerd, you read these. And in one of them, it says the basis of all composition, going back to Michelangelo, is the pyramid, the serpentine movement, and proportion. This is a page from Hogarth's Line of Beauty. And so if we were to look at the Libyan Sibyl, the drawing, I'm going to share with you a sheet that was given to me. And this sheet that was given to me was given by Stuart Feldman, who you heard about earlier, a gentleman and sculptor I apprenticed under and studied with. But Stuart's teacher studied with Rodin. This was given maybe 2 months into class. And so here, Stuart has drawn out what we would call simple geometric shapes over the Libyan Sibyl. I told all the students that we were going to talk about this stuff, because normally we don't talk about this stuff. We keep this in-house. But Zach agreed that it was okay, and I got the okay from the higher powers of Gary that we'll give you a little bit. Not too much, though. And then you all have to forget. These are the shapes scribed. Some would say it looks like a modern piece of art. I would say that's exactly what it looks like. Where do you think those guys got all that information from? They gave us the basis of what the Greeks, the Egyptians, the High Renaissance were sharing in their work. Now, this is an oversimplification of an absolute masterful drawing. But the point is to show is that geometry exists. It's nature's language. Now, Michelangelo is an expert anatomist. These are cadaver drawings of his. It's difficult to know how long he was actually studying cadavers. There's multiple reports. Some is 7 years, some is 12 years. There's other reports that he would carve during the day, dissect at night. Hard to say. But he is an expert in human form. And so let's look at the David together. This is stuff that we talk about in class. So this is going to be the advanced class because you're all advanced students now. Welcome. Here's our pyramid. Here's our S-curve. Here's our proportion. And you may say, well, it's not inside the box. And I'm like, yes, I see that too, because that comes up. But you can see that the navel is exactly on the golden section. And there's 1,000 other divisions that we can get into and talk about, but we're going to skip that. But here's the gamut. This is the limited number of directions on the David that I put on the sheet of music for you. I highlighted them so you could count them in different colors. And here they are. So after Michelangelo, we get the Mannerist, which is considered in between the High Renaissance and the Baroque. This is Perino da Vinci. Unfortunately, he passed away at 23. But it's actually Leonardo's nephew. You can see the S-curve present. It's marble, he carved it. And he did it in his early 20s. This here is Pontormo, my personal favorite. Here's basic geometric shapes and the whirling square on top of it. I had the opportunity to see this and it lived up to what I thought it was going to be, if not more. Here's Bernini, Apollo and Daphne. You can see spirals, common angles, sound composition of line that's overlaid with truth of form. Here's the Taking of Christ. This is probably my favorite painting, oil painting. It's by Caravaggio and it's in Dublin. Naturalism, chiaroscuro, light and dark composition, which is referred to as no-tan in Japan. All considered here. You can see spirals, diagonals, and an amazing color theory. This is El Greco. This is the Holy Trinity, strongly influenced by Michelangelo. El Greco actually had the opportunity to study with one of Michelangelo's good friends, Tintoretto. Spirals, diagonals are everywhere. I love this painting. And here we have Descent from the Cross by Peter Paul Rubens. Everything here is twisting, turning. As Myron would say, it's very alive. It's very active. Every form, every line is an S-curve. And so it's waves within an ocean. Everything's connected. No separation. Rubens not only is a master painter and draftsman, but he's an excellent art historian. This is the Farnese Hercules. It's a Roman copy of a Greek sculpture. On your, what is that, your right? Your left? Either one. Depends which way you want to be. On the left, on the other side, whatever. On the other side of the sculpture, you can see there's geometric shapes. The geometric shapes overlay one another, and there's the emphasis of squares. According to the Greeks, there were three main geometric shapes. There was ovals, triangles, and squares. This comes from Rubens. Rubens wrote a book. Van Dyck copied it. And then Rubens' studio burnt down. So we lost the book. We have some of it. But Rubens had in his possession a Da Vinci book, or copy of. And so the Farnese Hercules, its predominant shape is a square, or rectangle, with overlaying triangles and ovoids. So we're going to jump from Italy in a few hundred years to the Beaux-Arts. As information has moved up and across Europe, we have what is considered the greatest art school of its time, the Beaux-Arts. The École Beaux-Arts was started, it changed its form several times, but you could say it started in 1648. Artists such as Renoir, Ingres, Degas, Géricault, Carpeaux, Chaput, Gérôme, and Bouguereau studied there. Famously, Cézanne and Rodin were not accepted. Yeah, Rodin actually applied 3 times. Yeah, and for some reason, there's stories that say it was the figure drawing, but hard to know. It worked out for him. Here's a sculpture by Carpeaux. Carpeaux died early, unfortunately. But this is the Ugolino and his sons in marble. This is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. composition's off its charts. I would say the ewes there, or his sons, are the most organic, naturalistic figures ever carved, in my humble opinion. I think those are the most incredible carvings I've personally ever seen, outside of Michelangelo's work. Carpeaux adored Michelangelo. And there's a wonderful quote that I'll share with students. And here it says, when an artist feels pale and cold, he runs to Michelangelo in order to warm himself as with the rays of the sun. This is a portrait by Carpeaux. It's one of the most profound portraits I've ever seen. Carpeaux and Rodin were contemporaries, separated by 20 years. I've always loved Rodin's work, but even more so, the more I learn about him, the more amazing his sculpture becomes. This is one of the most ambitious projects Rodin had. This is the gates of hell. You can see the shades at the top. You can see the thinker just below. It's an amazing piece of sculpture. Rodin said, Michelangelo called me to Italy, and there I received precious insights, which I took into my spirit and into my work before I even understood what it was about. Rodin goes to Italy, and he comes back, and one of the first sculptures he made is St. John the Baptist. It's a remarkable sculpture. There's curved linear movements that he only could have learned from Michelangelo or Cellini. It's very avant-garde in its creation. Rodin said, in order to activate an inanimate material such as bronze or stone, one has to take a whole story and put it into one pose. And so at least 3 poses should be in one. And that's how we get the walking man and the St. John the Baptist. I have to show her. This is Camille Claudel. If you don't know who she is, she's worth looking up. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough of her work because of a very complicated relationship with her family. But she's one of my favorites. And she had a very complex relationship with Rodin. But this is The Little Lady by Claudel. My favorite portrait. And so at this point, not only do we have geometry, but we're breaking rules for the purpose of poetry. Michelangelo gives to history the permission to move off the rules and to move into a space that has no rules, where there is just flow. And you're just moving with nature's fabric. And in only that way can you get a portrait like this, where it comes from a nameless thing or the fabric of our lives, of how we move through life. One could say is that you don't tell a flower when to bloom. It blooms on its own nature. And so that's the way these works evolve. Cool. Snap. Nice. Here we have three of the greatest artists that known. We have Henry Chaput, William Bouguereau, and Auguste Rodin. These three figures are responsible for bringing poetry from Paris to the United States. We also have to add two more, Jerome and Carpeaux. Jerome taught at the École for over 40 years and had a very active atelier. So this information, this poetry that's been inspired by the Greeks, added on and elevated to a level of a nameless element by Michelangelo, then inspired again by the École and its artists and teachers, comes to Philadelphia. It comes to Philadelphia and New York, and these artists are responsible for much of what we have today within the figurative sculpture world. We have Malvina Hoffman. Next to her is Augustus St. Gaudens, Boris Bly, Frederick McMoonies, Laredo Taft, Charles Gravely, and Daniel Chester French. Daniel Chester French created the Lincoln Memorial. You can reflect upon what we talked earlier about King Joseph in Egypt. Vertical lines, simple composition. They're very well versed in art history, composition, and anatomy. So in Philadelphia, they start the Pennsylvania Academy. And Charles Gravely is called from Paris for family reasons, lands at the Pennsylvania Academy, and teaches sculpture. First sculpture program that the Pennsylvania Academy had. He was suggested to be the instructor there by Thomas Eakins. Charles Gravely is the father of the figurative arts for many of us. He brought artistic truths back from Paris. His teachers were William Bouguereau and Henry Chaput. An amazing education. Charles Gravely taught Gary Weissman and Steve Perkins' teacher, Leslie Posey, or Mr. Posey as they refer to him. Mr. Posey was in his 80s when Gary and Steve were studying with him in Sarasota, Florida. There's many funny stories with that, but we'll leave that there. Below them is Augustus Rodin. Boris Bly was studying at the Imperial Academy in St. Petersburg. Moved to Paris, like Malvina Hoffman, and studied with Rodin in his workshop and studio. Came back to the United States and started the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. And there, Stuart Feldman met Boris Bly. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you meet the right people at the right time. I had the opportunity to study with all these sculptors. Gary Weissman, Steve Perkins, and Stuart Feldman. I started studying with Stuart at 20 years old. Worked with him for about 4 years. At the same time, Zach said, you gotta go up and hang out with Gary. Zach Cates. We were classmates at the time, and he's the principal sculpture instructor at Lime Academy. He kept saying, you gotta go up there and visit him. I went up and met Gary and his wife, Tracy Ziegler, who's also a sculptor, also a part of the Grayfleet lineage, in 2003. And I kept going up there consistently until 2008. And every time I would go there, I would tell him, like, I would like to move here. Like, this is working out really well. I think I'd like to be a full-time apprentice. And he would tell me, I think it's time for you to go home. And so weekend visits turned to week visits, turned to month visits. And eventually I moved in with Gary and his wife. And I lived with them for 2 years. They're like parents to me. This is Myron Barnstone. He is as fierce as he looks in front of the Van Gogh drawing. Zach Keynes is his protege. That is a picture of Zach at the top. Zach lived with Myron off and on for 3 or 4 years at his studio, was his TA. Tracy Ziegler and Dan Thompson are below. They had also studied with Myron. I studied with Myron for about a year and a half. It was I loved the man, but he told me I'm a nice kid, but I'm lazy. And I didn't think I was lazy. I really didn't. But he knew what to say and how to push you. Myron studied at the Ruskin School at Oxford. And he ended up showing in Paris during the times of Giacometti and Picasso. He got married, they had a child, and he moved back to the United States and opened up a small atelier. He had worked at universities within architectural programs, but found the restrictions within the schools difficult to deal with. And the professors often became jealous of him in regards of his discussion of the golden section. And so he figured, the hell with it. Oh, I shouldn't curse in here. He said, oh, sorry. That he would just stop and open up his own atelier. I also had a great privilege. I studied for 12 years, so I've been around. Of hanging out, working with, and studying with 3 incredible painters. Now, Jordan Sokol and Amaya also know these sculptors and painters really well, but these 3 particularly. On the left is a drawing of Michael Grimaldi. The painting in the center is by Kate Lehman. And then the drawing on the right of the bearded man is by Dan Thompson. Incredible instructors and incredible artists. Really fortunate to have spent time with them. So what is happening now at Lime Academy is absolutely extraordinary. And it's becoming a historical moment for the figurative arts. Beyond what is usual, or beyond what is ordinary or unusual, highly unusual or exceptional or remarkable moments. That is a picture of Gary Weissman at the top, working alongside a student instructor. Here is the work of the full-time faculty at Lime Academy. These are the living masters of our time. They're here, right down the street. It's absolutely amazing that they're here. And Emily Weeks, bottom corner, is our art histories teacher. She also teaches at Yale University. These students are receiving the most remarkable education, my instructors have ever seen. So we're going back 75 to 80 years. Amaya and Jordan are the artistic directors of Lime Academy and the captains of the ship. What they have created and the space and the freedom and the trust that they have given on the sculpture side is quite rare. Sculpture programs are usually accessories to painting programs. We're usually put in the basement, it's dirty, and we don't get a lot of space. I've asked Jordan more than once, I can't believe we're allowed to have all this space in the studio. And he said, I just like sculpture. This is Jordan and Amaya's lineage, going back to Jerome and Jules Joseph Lefebvre. I hope I tried to pronounce that properly. Again, you can see that these lineages matter. The information being shared isn't just cooked up in an echo chamber. These lessons are hundreds of years old, and they have historical reference. Here's the sculpture team. We have Alicia Ponzio, Zachary Kainz, and Heather Personette. It's quite rare to have a team of sculptors or faculty like this. Two other people I'd like to mention are Wendy Berry, our managing director, and the chair of the board, Michael Duffy. Wendy is exceptional, and so is Michael. Wendy is always available on campus and takes care of everything. Here's Heather Personette in the modeling room. The students at Lime Academy, the sculpture students, study figure modeling, which is sculpture. That's what we call figure modeling, or modeling of clay. Sculpture's the overarching title, but then we subdivide. We always have to work from big to small. Here's Zachary Kainz teaching the golden section. These are golden section calipers. You rarely see these, but the students learn them. They were found in Sargent's and many of the Impressionist painting box. So they would go out for plein air painting, and they could throw these golden section calipers up. And it would harmonize their compositions. Here are some of the things that Zach will teach. We all teach. On the left is an old composition book. On the top, you see the pyramid, the serpent, and then we have proportion, going back to the old treatises from the 14th and 15th century. The students also learn anatomy at Lime Academy. Here's Eddie Rochat, our principal anatomy instructor, and this is a drawing of Kyle, actually. Yeah. The same model from the Flow Grizz. Going through the morphology of the figure in a flayed manner, an écorché. So students not only learn optically how to judge, but they also learn conceptually how to review. Here's a piece I made next to the students. We work alongside the students as much as possible. Here are two drawings. One is by a first year and one is by a second year. Michael Siriotis drew the ear his first year, along with all of his imaginary figures around it. He's hard to keep still. But he just received a substantial commission, and then it's pretty awesome for someone in their second year to be commissioned to make a 7-foot bronze figure. And then Jordan Hine is the figure drawing. Jordan Hine teaches in the core sculpture program, the CE program, and you saw him demonstrate today. Here is a sculpture of a first to second year student, Amalia Zemfir. Amazing touch to the clay. She continued to work on this piece and is firing it now. The geometry is sound, and she's activated the surface in a beautiful manner. These are finished sculptures, bronzes, by students. These are second year students in the program. One is by Joseph Van Buren, and the other is by Jordan Hine. Now, they don't know that I did this. I don't know if they're here. But here's the gamut on their pieces. These are highly sophisticated artworks. This is not student work. You'd be hard-pressed to find in about 99.99999% of the art schools around the world able to teach this, let alone actually create it. Here's another student work by Carol Fay. Here's the gamut on hers. And this is a Pythagorean triangle, controlling the heights and the divisions and the angles of the figure. Here's more student work. Marina Maluzzo, Joseph Van Buren, and Elizabeth Conway. All bronzes, all done in their second and first year. They didn't even graduate yet. And this is Gary Weissman. This is a 7-foot figure over life-size bronze. His name is Tabula Rasa. You have to go back to Rodin to see someone with the amount of fluidity that Gary has in his figures. There's an honesty of form and truth. And we've gone way past putting a figure together through arithmetic. Everything's twisting and turning. And there's such subtlety in touch. It's incredibly sensitive. You can't get to this point, which we refer to the figure as a musical instrument, without an enormous amount of time and gratitude for the space and for the figure. So where are we going? We're growing. The school is continuously growing. And we're growing outside of Lyme Academy, outside of the United States, and internationally. The artists that we have visiting come from all over the world. And they teach here in Old Lyme. They go to the Big Y. Mm-hmm. It's quite special. On the sculpture side, we're currently organizing symposiums and conferences in Poland and in Paris for next year and the following year. I'm not doing it, Zach's doing it. And so thank you for your time. I'm grateful to be here with you all. That's the end of the lecture.
you want to open it up to any questions?
We can.
Does anybody have any questions for, well, first of all, on behalf of the Florence Griswold Museum, thank you so much for a terrific lecture. And thank you for giving us access to some of remarkable students who did a remarkable job in our galleries today. We invited members to see how sculptures are made, and one after the other was just astounded by what they got to see in the gallery today. It's just kind of a pop-up learning experience, and we hope that today's experience will be the first of many more down the road. So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And again, any questions?
How many international students do you have this year?
So exciting news is that we are accredited now. So all of our students, yes. Yeah. Jordan and Amaya are here. There's Jordan. And Wendy's here. Yeah. And Zach. They're all here. There's the students. Yeah. So, but back to your question, we're accredited now. And so now that we are accredited, which our accreditation came through in March or April, I believe. Now that we're accredited, we can begin to accept international students. So this is outside of my jurisdiction. So that's Wendy's department. But I don't know exactly when that will start, but it actually can start now that we're accredited. The wild thing is that the school we're only 5 years in. This is new leadership, new branding, new board, and a whole new faculty. And so with that it'll be some time until we have a lot of international students, but they're coming. There's a lot of interest.
Can you share a little bit about the Sculptors Retreat that does bring international artists here?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the Sculptors Retreat is an annual retreat that takes place at Lime Academy. We've increased the attendees and invites over the last 3 years. This year will be our 4th annual retreat, and we invite international sculptors and students to attend. It's a 3-day conference. It's free. They just have to travel to Connecticut. And housing is offered by the board. Their meals are paid for through donation. It's a remarkable event. And so we do have a lot of international buzz. Another exciting thing that happened this year is we have pathway agreements so that our students can receive an MFA. And so their credits earned at Lime Academy are considered equivalent to an undergraduate degree. And so we have a pathway agreement with New York Academy and Laguna College of Art, which is profound. Yes?
Yes, thank you. I hope I'm interpreting what you've so creatively shown to us as really the trajectory of realism, certainly in the sculptural field, but also in painting, fresco.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the Academy's presentation of the Western tradition, where does primitivism fit in? The kind of thing that emerged in the early 20th century with the discovery of Central African sculpture, etc., which had an influence, of course, on someone like Picasso, Antoine Bourdelle, his return to a kind of primitive inspiration in his early 20th century sculpture. Does that figure in your discussions with students?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. What's offered to the students is the ability to have range. And so this is the most sincere foundation that they can receive anywhere. And so the artists that you're mentioning, Picasso, Bourdelle, they had the most rigorous training, figuratively. And then they had choice. And so we offer the students choice, which is they can take the naturalism as far as they want to go, or they can change their hierarchy or priority towards a different avenue. And with that is that it offers a broader conversation to our students because our school is not dogmatic in that manner. And so with that is, I look forward to seeing what our graduates do, but it's often discussed in class, as Bourdelle worked with Rodin. So Bourdelle is brought up quite a bit. Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Okay.
Again, thank you all for coming tonight. Drive safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Thanks.